Um, John Stuart Mill was a very interesting figure in 19th century England. I don't know what to say about Mill. Just incredibly important figure. And what I'm getting at is this, that it's impossible in Mill, I think, to dissociate the moral theory from Mill's overall mission in life, you might say. John Stuart Mill was one of the most important public intellectuals of the 19th century, at least in the English speaking world, at least in Great Britain. And he was part of a tradition, an English tradition, through his father, James Mill, who was a very important utilitarian thinker, you might say, and very important. But James Mill was connected up with a whole bunch of other people, William Godwin, Mary Wollstonecraft, who were so-called free thinkers, rationalists, and who were essentially political in their thought. And that's what I'm getting at, is that it's very difficult to dissociate the moral theory from Mill's overall political goals. And you see that in this chapter of utilitarianism, that he has political aspirations. And when I say political aspirations, I don't mean personal political aspirations, although he did serve as a member of parliament for a few years. Not very successfully, I think, but his overall political goals are really the what united all these figures, James Mill, William Godwin, and certainly Mary Wollstonecraft, is they believed in the perfectibility of human beings. And this put them in a certain political camp. They believed that the human individual was perfectible and that society itself was perfectible. They believed in progress on the individual and especially on the social level. So that you'll see that many of the things that Mill says about happiness, we'll say in response to the Carlyle criticism that this is on page 27. It says, against this doctrine, however, rises another class of objectors who say that happiness in any form cannot be the rational purpose of human life and action, because in the first place, it is unattainable. That, I think, is the main criticism that Mill tries to refute, to answer in the following pages, that to say that happiness is the point of life, in the sense that, well, to increase happiness, to increase pleasure, and decrease unhappiness and pleasure is the whole point of our life and conduct and the way that we should think about our own lives individually and the way we should think about social life generally. The objection is, well, that's not a good plan. It's not a good basis for an approach to life because happiness is unattainable. Mill couldn't be more in disagreement with that idea. Happiness is attainable. And if, that is, it's not so, happiness is not some mysterious thing, as he says, right? Happiness can be attained. It's one of the things he says. Well, what is happiness but, on the one hand, tranquility, and on the other hand, excitement. And by excitement, he doesn't mean necessarily the excitement of sports or the excitement of war or the excitement, I mean, any of these things, just interest in life, exciting things. For him, it may be engaging in a public debate or writing a book or helping out in some political cause. These are all maybe personal sources of excitement for him, what he may be thinking of. On the other hand, tranquility, sort of the absence of pain and stress and anxiety. That happiness is not, as he says, overall or complete happiness. It's not being incredibly pleased at every moment, but any rational approach to happiness in an individual life will be much more balanced. Right? We can't always be pleased, and maybe we don't even always want to be searching after new pleasures. He certainly doesn't mean that. He means the kind of balance. He means the kind of balanced life that he himself believes that he enjoys, between work, between intellectual excitement, between personal relations with other people, and some important friendships and love relationships with his family, his wife and family, a very sort of tragic relationship with his wife who He married late in life, and then she died young. But he was very close to his stepdaughter, to his friends. He believes that he himself has a sort of balanced life, and that happiness is attainable. But that happiness, I just want to say again, is kind of a political thing for him, because he recognizes that most people have to do without happiness. They're called poor people, right? They're people who are worked to death and have no time for pleasures, and whose lives are filled with misery. He recognizes that, right? If I can find a good place where he puts this. Yes, I mean, this is page 29, the end of the first paragraph. In sort of describing a happy life, he says he says, a life thus composed, to those who have been fortunate enough to obtain it, has always appeared worthy of the name of happiness. And such an existence is even now the lot of many, during some considerable portion of their lives. That is, happiness is not some unattainable ideal. Happiness is enjoyed by some people. And then he ends with a political note. He says, the present wretched education and wretched social arrangements are the only real hindrance to its being attainable by almost all. And there, that draws together the on the one hand, educational conditions, on the other hand, social arrangement. It draws together these two ideas of perfectibility. Education is the perfection of the individual, so they're capable of more and more pleasures, more and more sort of refined pleasures and diverse pleasures and sort of noble pleasures. And on the other hand, social arrangements, the perfectibility of society. Why is it that most people are poor, and have to work like way too hard and have to do without the necessaries of life? Mill is saying that neither of these things is a permanent condition of human life. This put him in opposition, perhaps, to people like Malthus and other economists who might have thought differently. But Mill is a contemporary of Marx, and Marx and socialism generally. And a Marxist is somebody who believes that that we have attained this level of productive capacity, so that if we changed the way that wealth is distributed in our society, everybody can have enough. That's the basic idea of socialism, I think. That is, that industrialism and the scientific revolution have put human beings in the position where everyone could basically have enough of the basic necessities of life, really for the first time in human history. And all we need to do is to change our social arrangements, what Marx would call the property relations of the society, from capitalist to something like socialist. And certainly Mill, by this time at least, is a kind of, I would say, a socialist, insofar as he believes the greatest happiness principle demands socialism, right? Because it would make people happy not to be really poor, right? And socialism is an answer, first of all, primarily an answer to poverty in the minds of at least 19th century socialists. And I would say socialists today, too. Mill believes that happiness, in fact, is something that is attainable. And that if most people are not happy, well, that's mostly because of what he calls the wretched social arrangements of his society, and perhaps of all societies, and that what we really need to do. And from the beginning, utilitarianism, especially another of his father's friends, Jeremy Bentham, who's the real father of utilitarianism, earlier British thinker, a generation or two before Mill, saw utilitarianism not primarily as a code of individual conduct, but as a foundation for good legislation, for creating a good society. Because the purpose of law is really, purpose of government and law are to create the happiest situation possible. So I just want to say that a lot of this, cannot be separated from Mill's political aspiration or his social aspirations, his idea not just of providing a foundation for morality, but his ongoing project as a public intellectual to create a better society. And a better society for him would be a happier society, a society where social arrangements were not based upon custom, tradition, and power, which is basically what they were based on in reality, but based upon a rational foundation, and that rational foundation is the greatest happiness principle. Our institutions should reflect our aspirations to achieve the greatest happiness possible. That for him, that's perhaps the most important aspect of the greatest happiness principle of utility.